Some say that I should have been aborted. I am the 1% that's used 100% of the time to justify abortion. You see, my birth mom was a victim of the violence of rape, but I'm so grateful that she didn't make me a victim of the violence of abortion. You know who else is grateful? My two incredible parents who adopted 10 of their 13 children, and my amazing wife and 4 kiddos, 2 of whom were also adopted. Triumph can rise from tragedy. My birth mom's courage proved that to be true. She was stronger than abortion, and her resilience will have beautiful reverberations for generations. My name is Ryan Bomberger. I was conceived in rape, but adopted in love.
That incredible man is my special guest today, and I am so honored to have him here to share his story. I was talking with him a minute ago just about how important it is, these stories that shape people, because people should affect the way that we view policy and legislation and how we protect our most vulnerable and our most innocent. And that's why policy matters, because truly these stories and these experiences that we live out should shape the way that we govern. So Ryan Bomberger, thank you so much for joining me today. I am so honored. I think it was about 5 years ago that I first saw you. You popped up on my radar. You were on some Capitol steps out in Birmingham, and you shared your story. And my jaw dropped. I remember telling my husband, like, I've never heard it put this way, just so powerfully and in such a raw way. And you connected so many points in this conversation on abortion. And I don't want people to leave this podcast before we get through it. So if you're just joining in, please listen to this entire conversation. I promise you that there is so much value in this. And my hope and prayer is that it will shape the way that you think and engage on this incredibly important topic of the most vulnerable in our society. So I know that Ryan's story has shaped the way that I view abortion, and specifically the issue of rape and exceptions. So I know it's a tough conversation to have, and I want there to be a foundation of grace and love in this conversation, but it is so important that we are honest in how we handle this conversation. So Ryan, thank you. I want to give you the floor, my friend, to just kind of walk us through your story of how you came to be and who you are today. And I'll ask you some questions along the way, but I would just love for you to share your story.
Sure. I mean, like the video stated, I'm the 1% that's used 100% of the time to justify abortion. And that's no exaggeration. And sadly, in a world where people try to be arbiters of human value, we do that for things that we have no control over. Nobody controls the circumstances of their conception, and I certainly didn't. I was born in violence. I was conceived in rape, but I was adopted in love. And I grew up in an amazing family of 15. I have 6 brothers, 6 sisters. 10 of us were adopted and just loved like crazy by 2 parents, Henry and Andrea Bomberger, who loved the mess out of all of us. They loved Jesus. And when you love Jesus, that natural outflow is loving people. And they loved us. They didn't fixate on how I came to be, but they focused on who each of us were meant to be. And so that's my background. I grew up in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, on a farm. Most of my friends don't believe me that I grew up on a farm, but I did. I grew up on a farm, and I loved life. It was crazy. I mean, where else do you raise 13 kids and let them go wild? Yeah, exactly. So, fast forward so many more years. I'm married to the love of my life, my best friend, Bethany Bomberger, and we have 4 kiddos, 2 of whom were also adopted. So this whole issue of defending the most defenseless is something that just courses through my veins.
Sure. Let's just dive right into the nitty gritty. When the conversation of abortion comes up, especially like even in this 2024 campaign for the presidential campaign, even those who are the most protective for human rights, the most conservative, the most pro-life, a lot of times what you hear is, yes, I'm pro-life, except in the case of rape and incest, rape and incest. That comes up frequently. And rape is usually the one that is most frequently used as kind of that codule, that protective, but not those, but not those babies. Those babies, the ones born out of rape, they don't deserve the same protection that everybody else does, that inalienable right to life. But you, I'm going to really try to make it through this without crying. You sitting in front of me are a human being who was the product of rape, but your mother made the decision to give you that right to life. So I want to know how that feels, just as you hear the headlines, as you hear that narrative parroted again and again. How does it feel?
Well, it's dehumanizing, and not only to me, but I think to the women who go through such horrific violence, victims of rape. I think of my birth mom, my first hero in my life, who courageously went through 9 months of pregnancy and still gave me the gift of life, gave me the gift of adoption. I wouldn't be here without her. In fact, you mentioned the first time you heard me was in the Capitol steps in Birmingham, and I remember a lawmaker there. They were debating, exceptions, adding exceptions to bills. And of course, it's always the rape and incest exception. And she had called people like me the residue of the rapist. I'm not the residue of the rapist. I'm the resilience of my birth mom. And so when I hear people constantly using this thing, rape and incest, rape and incest, first of all, pro-abortion activists don't care what the exceptions are in these bills. They don't care about any of the exceptions. They just exploit them in order to justify all abortion. And so it's just a dehumanizing tactic that allows them to kind of justify the violence, not only against the unborn, but it's violence against women. Abortion is violence against women, regardless of the circumstances. And so that's why I'm so grateful that my birth mom, even though she was a victim of the violence of rape, she did not make me a victim of the violence of abortion. And people need to understand there's violence in both those cases. And who deserves to be punished? The other side doesn't want to talk about this, but the rapist is the one who deserves to be punished. And yet it's always the focus on the unborn child who shouldn't have the right to life. So when I hear people say this, and they say it to my face, I speak at a lot of college campuses. Harvard, for instance, I had one of the professors I was debating tell me to my face that I should have been aborted.
Do they, when they say that, they read the room, right? Like, do they know that that was your story and then they're kind of shocked into embarrassment? Or do they say it knowing your story and still say you should have been aborted?
Both. In this situation, she heard me tell my story. In fact, she looked at me and she said, "That's a cute story." Now, remember, This is a professor. This is a professor whose focus was on rape culture on campus. And she tells me that a strong woman, my birth mom, who chose life, even throughout those horrific circumstances, that was a cute story. That's where there's a disconnect, because there is this loyalty, this almost worship of abortion, and no receiving, no sensitivity to what's actually going on. And so I get this a lot, and I realize that it's a spiritual thing, so I don't really take it personally. But it's devastating to the women who are fed abortion is the solution to fill in the blank.
Yeah. What you mentioned the disconnect. What do you think that disconnect is when we're talking about children who were conceived in rape, and then the disconnect between you give birth to 2 babies in a hospital and no one could tell me which one was conceived in rape and which one was conceived in pure, passionate love. But where is the disconnect where inside the womb, we as a society would deem one, well, exceptions for that one? What is that disconnect?
I think it is throughout human history a perpetual disconnect because, first of all, it's easy to reject something in the abstract. So children who are in the womb are largely abstract, except to the mother or father who see the ultrasounds or whatever, But there has long been this disconnect. And so that's why it's easy to kind of say, well, because of these circumstances, you don't deserve to live. But there is no distinguishing. Certainly God doesn't distinguish. Psalm 139 that says we're fearfully and wonderfully made doesn't have an asterisk that says, oh, wait, if you were humanly planned.
Right.
But we as a society often have these certain conditions. And I think about in American history where people of my complexion, for instance, for many, many, many years were written off as less than human. Well, we're doing the same thing to the unborn. Over circumstances that they don't control and over circumstances that actually don't diminish their worth. So that disconnect for me is mostly a spiritual one. unfortunately, it's a codified one, because that's why you have laws now in states that are radically pro-abortion that just say any child can be destroyed throughout the entire pregnancy. But it's part of what we do through the Radiance Foundation, our organization, and trying to educate the public to humanize not just people with stories like mine, but every human life. Every human life has God-given purpose.
Right. I agree. What do you think when we're talking about this conversation of abortion? What important points do you think are being missed or intentionally left out in the conversation that uses rape victims as an excuse to end innocent humans up till birth? What points would you say are the ones that we need to start bringing to the table?
Yeah, I would say people don't understand that rape and incest constitute less than 1% of rape-related pregnancies, 1% of abortions in our country. There are about 1,037,000 abortions in the last reported year. Less than 1% of that are due to rape and incest. Yet, you would think that it would comprise the vast majority of abortions, and that's simply not true. The other thing is that people think that the natural follow-up to the act of violence of rape is abortion, but yet there are physiological, emotional, psychological, and certainly spiritual ramifications for the woman, regardless of the reason. And which is why I think when we talk about protecting the unborn, we have to talk about we need to protect the woman as well. The other part is the rapist aspect. I mean, I believe as a Christian that everybody is redeemable, thankfully. That's how God sees us. We are redeemable. Even the rapist is, but yet the rapist is the one that they don't talk about who should be punished. And here's the interesting thing. In 1977, the Supreme Court ruled in Coker versus Virginia that the rapist cannot get the death penalty because they called it cruel and unusual punishment. That was 4 years after they determined in Roe v. Wade, which was 73,
Wow.
that a child, an innocent child, could be killed for any reason throughout the entire pregnancy. So talk about a disconnect. There's a serious disconnect at the Supreme Court, but they were supremely wrong about Roe v. Wade. But when we hear about rape, there are so many things flying out there where people think, oh, well, this is the only solution. I've met hundreds of rape victims, women who became mothers through the horrible violence of rape, women who were birth mothers who chose adoption, and even post-abortive women. And here's the one thing that I even found shocking to find out in I do about 60 keynote events a year across the country. I found out that the common thread with all these women was that the child is the only redemptive part of such a horrific act. And I was surprised myself to see that. And I have birth mothers, I have post-abortive women who did choose the act of abortion who say that same thing. And that's why I want people to understand there's more to the story, which mainstream media would tell narratives like mine, but they don't like narratives like mine because it disproves their radical pro-abortion worldview.
Wow. So good. I want to know a little bit more about your growing up in an adoptive family and a very tiny little family.
Right.
I want to hear more about how your father lived out equality. I read an article that you had posted about how he adopted 10 of you, and he sounds like he was just an absolutely amazing man. This is from that article. I wasn't exactly planned. I was conceived in rape, but I was adopted in love. My dad didn't see me as lesser than because of the crimes of my biological father. And I'm forever grateful to a courageous birth mother who, although she was a victim of the violence of rape, never made me a victim of the violence of abortion. My father saw me just as worthy to love as his first 3 biological children. James 1:27 says, religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. My skin is brown. I have siblings of varying hues. One sister is Vietnamese. One brother is part Native American. Many of us are mixed. My parents are white. Who says you have to be the same color in order to love a child? That dehumanizing lie is the pollution that was and sadly still is a battlefront in adoption.
Yeah. I have the most amazing parents. My mom is still alive. My father passed away at the height of COVID, which was probably the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my life.
Yeah.
But he died on the anniversary of Roe v. Wade. And my dad really just, he proved to us that, that every human life has God-given purpose. He proved that by how he lived it out. I mean, he didn't distinguish between his adopted and biological children. I was the first adopted, and every year there's a new flavor added to the family. But he loved us all. I mean, my parents loved us. They unleashed God-given purpose, kind of like my shirt says, adoption unleashes purpose. And this is both in the natural and supernatural, by the way. But my father is the reason why I love being a dad, reason why I love being a husband, a reason why I love the Lord and I fight for the most marginalized. I mean, I'm the most marginalized among the marginalized.
Yeah.
And my father, his fight was not like a public sort of fight. He was no political activist in any way, shape, or form, but he lived it out every single day, loving us, correcting us, giving us opportunities to flourish. I couldn't have asked for better parents. Really couldn't have.
It's beautiful. Like I said, I'm really going to try not to cry. Going into that, like your upbringing and your origin point, how did that define you as the man that you are today?
There's something about understanding your origin story. See, my origin story was not correct for the first 13 years of my life. I had this, I don't know, I had this misunderstanding of how it came to be. And it was during let's just say a tense conversation. I was a handful. I'm just going to admit that. I was a handful with my parents. Still apologizing for that. But it was in a really tense conversation where my mom revealed through that conversation how I came to be. And it was devastating. I'm like, what? It was hard enough. Sometimes some of the struggle with adoption, like, why did they give me up? That's often the terminology. And then I understood it was more than that. It wasn't giving me up. It was giving me an opportunity to thrive. And I took that to an 8th grade public school persuasion speech and share with my friends and my teacher how I came to be. And I realized I had a story.
Wow. You stood up in front of your peers in 8th grade and shared your story.
Yes, with the trifold AV visual thing.
Oh, bless you.
And I saw the way that people responded. And that's why, knowing your origin and knowing it with that particular story, it changes it. You're not of more worth or value than the next person, but it changes the way that you see yourself and your responsibility, I could say. And so that's why I do what I do.
I can imagine that experience in 8th grade was almost like therapeutic, working out how you're going to identify with this story of who you are, and really coming into learning who you truly are. What were the things in that you wrestled with? What I'd love to know, like, just when you found out who you were and are and how that made you, what issues in that did you struggle with the most?
Well, interestingly enough, it erased the feeling that I had no worth before, in the sense that, not that my parents imparted that to me, they loved the mess out of me, but I was the favorite in the family. But anyway, it was the, why did someone give me up? That they didn't love me enough, they didn't want me enough, because my version of the story was that my birth mom and my birth father fell in love, but they were too young, they couldn't take care of me, all that, but that wasn't obviously the case. And so it definitely changed and erased that question of I didn't have worth to, oh my gosh, I have this story, I have this testimony that not everyone has. And there's something about that. And when I saw the way that some of my friends were responding in class, a lot of them were crying. My teacher had tears coming down her eyes. I knew at the age of 13 that I had something to share. And it would take years, obviously years, for me to have a much larger platform than my 8th grade public classroom, public school classroom. But I knew that there was something different, and it did change the way that I saw myself. It changed the way that I saw my worth and the way that I saw my God-given purpose. It just kind of solidified what my parents have been pouring into me, that we all have God-given purpose, planned or unplanned. And so that really took off.
That it would have given you just this sense of that you were valuable enough to be rescued.
Yeah. Yes. And that's what my parents did for me. By the way, my parents are white, and I just have to throw this out there. All these people who talk about this white savior complex, that's BS. That is, I call that bogus stuff. That is such such toxic propaganda because you don't have to be the same color to love somebody. Children who are languishing in the foster care, which tend to be black and brown children, they tend to languish longer because of what's called kinship care, because they try to keep them with next of kin, and I understand that. But the reason why they languish longer is because many of these child welfare organizations don't want to allow white parents to adopt a black or brown child. No child flourishes that way by languishing in foster care. There's no child waiting and saying, you know what, I'm going to wait for somebody who's my same color. No, they want a mom and a dad to love them. So I thank God. In fact, for me, it's like one of the biggest acts of racial reconciliation.
Oh, that's
loving a child of a different race or color because they deserve to be loved.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love the way that you just put that. Have you had a chance to meet your birth mother?
I haven't. I did engage in a search years and years ago, and the search came up without a response. So that's why I've created some things. If you go to our website, radiance.life, you'll see a video that just shows all the things that I've been able to become in my life by the grace of God and because of her singular decision. So I thought if I never see her, maybe she will see this online. So I haven't, but I don't know how much time I have, but I did find out. I got my birth certificate from the state of Pennsylvania. They changed their laws and they allowed people with stories like mine to actually get our original birth certificate. So it took me 3 years to finally fill out the application. I did that, got the birth certificate. This is wild because I knew very little about her. I knew she was white, knew the biological father was black. I knew that she served in the military. I knew it's like few things about her, but I didn't even know her name. So I get this birth certificate in the mail, open it up right away, and the first thing I see is her name. And it's wild, the power of a name. But it was the first time I had ever seen her name. I saw my original last name. And then my wife and I, because the internet tells you everything.
Yeah.
Some things that you don't want to know, but in fact, that's the case here. My wife, in a matter of minutes, she's like, oh my gosh, Ryan, I found her. And she said it's her obituary.
Oh.
Because for so many years, all I wanted was to meet her, just to thank her. Not this talk show sort of thing where it's like, I have to have a relationship with her. No, I just wanted to meet her and to say thank you.
Yeah.
That you gave me this incredible gift. But here are two things I found out from her obituary. One, I was born on her birthday. That was crazy. And she had died from cancer. I was diagnosed with cancer earlier this year. And I had surgery in May, and the short story, of course, that was all devastating to find all that out. But the short story is I am cancer-free. I'm in remission, and I thank God for that.
Lord.
But I will never, on this side of heaven, be able to say to her, thank you. I'll never be able to hug her.
Yeah.
But she caused beautiful reverberations. The most beautiful ones are my kiddos, my wife, Bethany, and my kiddos, Radiance, Aaliyah, Kai, and Justice. And she never could possibly know the beautiful reverberations that her singular, courageous decision made. And I could never thank her enough.
Man. Okay. Okay, I was really holding it together up until then. What a powerful story, and a story that I think can speak to so many young women out there who, I'm sure that someone's going to listen to this somewhere who maybe they're in the same situation that your mom was in, and they're hearing this story for the first time, and just to hear, or they're hearing a story of redemption like this for the first time.
Right.
And I think to hear that, to see someone like an actual human being grown up who, against all odds, survived and thrived. And like you said, that one singular decision by your sweet mama who, Mom, I'm going to tell you, I'm so proud of you, Ryan. I'm so proud of you. I think that your story can save so many. And in that, your mom's decision to save you will save so many. What would you, what hope would you give to some woman somewhere right now listening to this who's struggling with that decision of, do I keep the baby? Do I give the baby up? Do I go to my abortion appointment that's scheduled for the end of this week? What hope would you give to her?
I would say, first of all, you are loved. And I'm sorry that you even went through something so horrific, but God loves you. God loves that unborn child. And there is help. There are so many young women out there who feel like they're all alone, there are pregnancy centers. There are about 3,000 across the country that will walk with you on this journey. You do not have to do this alone. There are maternity homes too for those who find themselves in that situation where they need the housing. There is so much support. And I want to encourage those who know someone who's going through that. Be their support. Pray for them. Pray with them. We're all stronger than our circumstances, and it's hard to imagine going through certain things until you do. But, Philippians 4:13 doesn't have this little disclaimer. Well, some of you can do all things. No, we can all do all things through Christ who strengthens us. And I just want to encourage someone who's gone through that. There are other women who've been there. There are resources out there for you. And the best resource, other than the local church, particularly a Bible-believing local church, not that you should ever have to say that, but a Bible-believing local church, but a pregnancy center. For women who've been in those same situations, they have walked that same journey, and they can walk with you. And not just until you give birth to the child, for even a couple years after that, but you are never alone. Don't believe the lies of the devil. He's always trying to discourage you, to steal, kill, and destroy. But there is help. There is hope.
There is so much hope. Just to go one layer deeper on that, for women who are listening to this, who have gone through an abortion and they're hearing this now, or maybe they've been hearing this conversation that's become much louder, going up to Roe v. Wade being overturned and through it now, they're hearing all of this and they feel such an amount of guilt over the decision that they've made. And they can't get past it. It wrecks them. They're haunted by it. I hear those stories both in my DMs, and I have friends who have shared with me that it's something that they can't shake. We as Christians have such a hope in redemption. And the further in I go into politics and culture, the more I see that there really are so many situations that your truest answer in terms of healing and redemption is Christ and the gospel. Yeah. And I would love for you to just speak to those women who have been mired through their experience of abortion and struggle with that decision that they made, just to give them that encouragement of that does not define you forever. Right. There is redemption, and there is a God who sees you still as valuable and loves you and doesn't see you as trash. And I would just love for you to talk to those women.
Absolutely. Well, I want to make sure that any woman who is listening understands that there are great resources in your local area. If you go to pregnancycenters.org, this is before you've make a decision, or maybe even after you've made a decision. Pregnancycenters.org, you just put in your zip code and you'll find your local pregnancy center. For those who are post-abortive, God loves you. I mean, for the women and the men, I met, in the past 10 years, so many men who force their girlfriends or even their wives to have an abortion, and they're post-abortive. There are great resources for you. God, we serve a God of wholeness and healing. And he doesn't want you to live in this perpetual guilt. That's not of God. And so there are great resources for you too. In fact, if you go to radiancefoundation.org/heal, there are some great national resources for you. There are organizations like Rachel's Vineyard, there are Save the One. There are so many organizations with women who are post-abortive, men who are post-abortive, who will walk you through those journeys. Some of them hold retreats. Your local pregnancy center often has a post-abortion counseling support group. Don't live another day in that regret and that shame. God can take that away. I know it's a process. As with many things in life, it's a process. But there are people there who are willing to pour into your healing. Don't live another day with all that shame and all that regret. That's not of God. It's just something that keeps you from getting the wholeness and the healing that you need.
Amen. Gosh, I could talk to you for so long, and we will have you back on because there are so many other topics that you covered. But for right now, I want you to let people know how they can find you and the incredible work that you and your wife are doing. And I see your books in the background. I've shared those before. I know.
Yeah. Thank you for that, by the way.
I love them. We gave out quite a few to my community. We did like a big giveaway, and it was awesome. I got so much
Yeah.
positive feedback on your books. But how can people find you and the work that you are doing? And for those women that we talked about, those who are struggling with a decision right now, there's a baby
Right.
in their womb and they don't know what to do. And those women who have gone through with an abortion and feel that guilt, you have so many resources. So share with people how they can access all of that.
Sure. The main website for the Radiance Foundation is Radiance, RADIANCE.life. That's our main website. Of course, we got social media out there as well. There's also our site, adoptedandloved.com, for those women who may have gone through a situation like my birth mom and want to know more about adoption, want to know more about the beautiful reverberations that adoption causes. Go to adoptedandlove.com. And there's one more resource for those who go through this horrific violence, who've gone through, who have experienced rape. There is another organization that's not tied to us, but it's a friend of mine. It's Save the One. It's the number one, SaveThe1.com. Rebecca Kiesling. It is basically it's kind of like an array of women became mothers through rape, those who are post-aborted, those who are birth mothers through rape. And you can actually connect to some of these people and be able to talk to them because they've got some of the most healing testimonies ever. You don't have to go through this alone. There are other people who've been through. That's SaveThe1.com. And maybe what we'll do is we'll make sure that we have that listed on our main website, radiance.life. But please connect with us. We have so many resources, videos, op-eds, graphics, so many things for you to be able to, I don't know, be inspired by what God does. And what does he do? He enables triumph to rise from tragedy all the time.
Beauty from ashes.
Yes.
And I'll have links to everything, all the resources that you shared, I'll compile down below. So my team is on that. I want to end this with something that is on your website, and I just think it nails this whole dialogue. There is no right more fundamental than the right to live. We live in a culture that pretends that life doesn't precede liberty and the pursuit of happiness, but it's the right upon which all others depend. Amen. Isn't the truth? Ryan, thank you so much for joining us, for being so vulnerable, and for sharing your story. I pray that it helps people understand that regardless of the way in which you were conceived, every single human from conception deserves the right to life.